Hello and welcome to Tucson Bitcoin podcast. My name is Alex, and today's a really sad day because I think Bitcoin's dead. You know, it just keeps on dumping and dumping and dumping. Man, I'm thinking about ending my podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Guy Swan did a great episode last week about Bitcoin being dead. I mean, this is just a thing that happens over and over again. I'm doing great. No Coiner's been reaching out to me asking me if I'm okay. I mean, the price fluctuations, it's just a normal happening in the space. Like this happens. It goes up and down. And, you know, when you get out of this short-term thinking of like, I want to make a quick buck, I want to flip this coin into 50 grand in 3 months or whatever, you know, these price fluctuations don't matter. This thing is about so much more than making dollars. You know, a lot of Bitcoiners don't even want to make dollars. They just want to hold on to get and accumulate as much Bitcoin as they can because they see what Bitcoin for what it is. You know, it's a global payments network that is going to revolutionize everything and take over the world and kill fiat currencies. You know, it already is. We're watching all of these established players, you know, figure out that they can't stop Bitcoin. You know, and they're figuring out ways how can they control it, you know, which they can't. And they're trying to, you know, figure out how do they stay relevant in this world where Bitcoin is. And it's crazy. It's like, it's crazy. It was $1 trillion market cap, you know, it's freaking people out, you know, and there's going to be a lot of FUD. There's going to be a lot of hate, you know, and the more that you learn, the better. You know, well, anyways, my guest today is Russ Harben, and we're discussing Bitcoin privacy. It's a really important topic. Privacy in general is something that I'm passionate about, and I think is important. The cypherpunk movement was born out of this need for privacy with the internet, you know, which could either be a great liberator or a great surveillance tool. And that goes with any technology. It goes with the Internet of Things. It goes with, you know, just your basic computer phone usage, and it goes with Bitcoin. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Alrighty, we're recording. Good to have you on, Russ. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thanks, Alex.
So we had a great conversation the other night at the Meetup in Phoenix that could have been a recorded podcast as well. So I kind of see this as a continuation of that conversation. We went into the weeds on all sorts of things, but yeah. So yeah, you're a big advocate for Bitcoin privacy, which, you know, is kind of a contentious topic in a lot of different circles on whether, you know, you should use Monero or Bitcoin's not private, or you know, you should coin join everything. There's a lot of different opinions on it. So what's your kind of overall opinion on Bitcoin privacy?
Well, I think privacy is pretty important just from a, you know, money perspective. I think that you have to have some sort of expectation of privacy in order to be able to feel like you can transact freely. You know, whether that's with Bitcoin or really anything else. You know, and we have privacy from the standpoint, you know, of fiat currency, meaning that, like, you know, your job can't necessarily tell what you're spending your paycheck on, but, you know, you have to trust your bank basically to know everything that you're spending. And so, you know, from that perspective, there's an aspect of privacy that's around, you know, trusting someone to keep your transactions private. And, you know, I think the majority of people these days trust their bank to do that. You know, from a Bitcoin perspective, though, the way that the system is structured, you know, the thing that Bitcoin is all about is minimizing trust. And so, you know, one of the trade-offs that you have to make with that is that all of the transactions are public. You know, they're published to the blockchain, and it's something that is open to everyone to inspect and view. And that's how Bitcoin, you know, achieves sort of a trustless system, is that everyone can verify it. Everyone can make sure that, you know, the transactions are following all the rules, and that, you know, there aren't coins being minted out of thin air, at least, you know, ones that the protocol doesn't allow. But I think, you know, as part of that trade-off, you know, you're potentially sacrificing allowing other people to see, you know, your transaction history and being able to link your transactions together. You know, if say, you know, you go buy a pizza with some Bitcoin, and then you turn around and, you know, go buy something on a darknet market, and, you know, you're using the same wallet to do that, and you're doing that in a way that allows those transactions to be logically linked together, then, you know, the person who you bought the pizza from will be able to see, okay, you know, you're purchasing something from a darknet market, or you're doing something else with your Bitcoin. Or, you know, the other part of it is, you know, being able to go back and say, okay, well, this person, they paid from a UTXO that's worth 10 Bitcoin. So, you know, they're obviously rich. And hey, wait, I think I know where that guy lives. So, you know, there's a lot of different aspects to privacy, and, you know, why it's important with Bitcoin, from, you know, from just a sheer sort of personal safety perspective to, you know, feeling like you can make transactions and not have the world sort of be able to look at all of that and know exactly what you're doing. I think if you do have this feeling that people are watching you, you're more likely to censor yourself. You're more likely to not do the types of things that you would otherwise do. And so, you know, I think that's against sort of the ethos of Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin is supposed to be about censorship resistance, and the ability to transact regardless of what someone tells you. So, you know, I think that's an aspect where, you know, privacy is important. Understanding the privacy aspects of Bitcoin is important, and you know, being able to use Bitcoin in a privacy enhanced way, so that you're not revealing too much information, or you're not, you know, putting yourself at risk. I think it's important for people to know how to do it, and you know, understand where they might be making mistakes, and how to avoid those.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. It's really interesting that you brought up like people's decisions are influenced by the idea of like somebody watching you. And I've seen that a lot in content creation, just in general, where they make these examples of people. And I mean, I've seen it in myself, you know, it influences what I can and can't, or what I allow myself to say and don't say, the topics that I discuss on the podcast, because I, you know, put it up on YouTube or wherever, that has a, a likelihood of getting censored if I talk about certain subjects, even if there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it makes me walk on eggshells. And then from a, you know, financial standpoint, in the fiat world where literally everybody is being watched,
Mhm.
to a large degree. And I mean, it's just like we've seen it happen over and over again. It also influence, like both of these things, the social media censorship and the financial censorship go together, because so many people have been censored financially for the things that they say. Um, so yeah, I think like for some people, like diving into this, especially if they're new, their heads are going to be spinning, you know, with this idea of like privacy. They hear something like UTXO. Um, they, you know, might not understand everything that's going on. I think it's important to understand the importance of privacy. And to add that, to not put it on the back burner, you know, of topics to cover in Bitcoin. Um, but yeah, I mean, let's talk about like how somebody can identify you. So one of the things that you said is like, if you send a merchant a transaction or a peer a transaction, they can see how much Bitcoin is in your wallet address and then associate that with you. What are some other ways that people can be identified?
Well, I think you could maybe break it down a couple of different ways. One would be, someone that you're buying something from, with Bitcoin. Uh, they can look at the the payment transaction on the blockchain, and then look at the history of the coin that you spent, and make certain inferences about what your wallet contents are. And so there's that aspect of privacy from someone that you're spending money with. There's also the aspect of privacy from from a know your customer AML kind of perspective, where if you buy Bitcoin from, say, Coinbase, Coinbase, as part of how they operate, they've basically been forced to monitor the actions of their customers. And so if you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase and then withdraw it to your wallet, and then you go and do something like purchase something on a darknet market without having some kind of obfuscation of that link between Coinbase and whatever you go purchase, Coinbase, they actively monitor that, and they'll notice it most likely, and you'll probably get your account shut down, because that's something that they don't want, and they feel like they have a responsibility to prevent their customers from doing that kind of activity. So there's sort of the privacy that you would want to have with someone who is on the receiving end of a transaction, not being able to know a lot about you, but also the source of wherever you got your Bitcoin. There's that sort of forward privacy, where you don't want the entity that you received Bitcoin to know what you then go do with it. So those are, I would say, kind of just the two different categories that I would kind of lump things into, from the standpoint that you have to think of sort of both directions of the way that you're doing these transactions. So I think that's just one way of, I think, looking at it.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think like a lot, one of the things that is brought up is this idea of like, I'm not doing anything wrong, so there's no reason for me to stay private. And, that it's a really silly, bad argument, I think, because if that were really the case, everybody would just live in glass houses. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that argument, I would say it sort of falls apart from the standpoint that, just because you have nothing to hide doesn't mean that you want your entire life broadcast to the world. And it's, yeah, people might not have things to hide necessarily. They might not be doing things wrong, from their view, but in some places, just the act of receiving Bitcoin or using Bitcoin is against the law. And I would like to think that our current country would never go down to the path of making it illegal to own or receive Bitcoin. But from that standpoint, maybe 5 years from now, if you haven't been using privacy protecting techniques, then maybe someone can identify the fact that, all right, you were on the receiving end of a certain amount of Bitcoin, and you could get a knock on the door to say, all right, we're going to require you to disclose how much you have, etc. I would hope that we wouldn't ever get to something like that happening, but I think it's just worth thinking through some of those maybe less likely scenarios to think, okay, well, I don't think that is likely to happen, but if it does happen, what sort of ways or what sort of techniques could I use to sort of mitigate, being able to have someone, come and have that kind of conversation with you. And it's not going to ever be perfect because just the way that Bitcoin is designed, you can't really prove necessarily that you don't have control of Bitcoin, but you can, I think, structure your transactions so that it creates some plausible deniability that at some point in the future, if there is someone scrutinizing things, that it's not a cut and dry situation where they can definitively point back to transactions that you did and then be able to show that you still control a certain amount, or that that you did certain activity. So I think I think it's just important to try to create that deniability, create a situation where it's not 100% certain in terms of the activity that you've done.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, especially like when we see the courts being used as a weapon, and the politicization of law enforcement and all of this stuff. I mean, anything could be used as a weapon against you. I think like one of the biggest arguments for using Bitcoin to purchase things and to use privacy methods is the amount of data that we leak when we're interfacing with the merchants. So like, we watched Ledger get hacked pretty recently, where their database was put out all over the internet. So that's addresses, phone numbers, etc. I don't think people really realize how much data they leak when they go and they swipe a debit card, or order something online from, say, Amazon, or in this case Ledger, and how risky that is to a certain degree to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the thing that drives me crazy about, and is the biggest, and I think best and most sound argument against the KYC AML rules, is it is stupid to put your driver's license photo, with your address on it, and your driver's license number and your social security number into these financial services that are likely to get targeted and get your identity stolen and never be able to recover that information. And
yeah, no, I think that with sort of the traditional sort of financial world, again, it comes down to trusting these institutions that you're using with this information. And that's, I think, something that people don't really think about. I mean, it's sort of become normalized that in order to to have a financial life, you've got to give up this information. You've got to basically put yourself out there and trust in these institutions that they're going to protect it. And I think we've seen again and again that that's not the case. That databases get leaked. I mean, you look at like I think it was Equifax a few years ago. Leaked like 2/3 of American adults credit information. And I think that the fiat world, the normal financial world, you just sort of accept that as well. that's the cost of participating in this world. And it's not really voluntary. It's you've got to do that, or else you're going to have to pay cash for everything, and you're not going to be able to have a bank account, and you're not going to be able to have a debit card. And I think people have just sort of accepted that, which is unfortunate, because that mindset becomes a lever that can be a source of control in the future. And right now it's not really the case. I mean, yeah, if you do something that's identified as money laundering using traditional financial tools, you're going to get your bank account shut down. You're going to get potentially arrested and thrown in jail. And so, from that standpoint, I mean, we've accepted this definition of money laundering, and of there being financial activity that's improper, that's illegal. And I think it's tough to really argue that, like, we should allow people to launder money, launder drug money, or to steal money and be able to use it for nefarious purposes. It's tough to make that argument. No one, I don't think anyone would say, we should allow criminals to just operate freely. But I don't think people think through sort of the implications of that, is that the definition of what is criminal and what's illegal can be sort of arbitrarily changed. And what you might think right now, well, that's obviously an illegal act, to launder drug money, and we should never allow that. But if the government at some point says, well, using a debit card to purchase a 3D printer, that's going to be considered illegal, because you could use a 3D printer to create firearms. I think there could be these situations that develop, and the more that we allow the government and financial institutions to make those kinds of decisions for us, the more freedom, the more just self-determination that we give up. And we, it's sort of like the frog boiling in water situation, where you don't really notice it at first, and you think, okay, well, I'm not doing any of that illegal activity, so it doesn't really concern me. But I do think there's a possibility that it could get to a point where common things that we would do, that a lot of people take part in, those could be frowned on or made illegal. And at that point, we've gotten ourselves to a system where we've pretty much given up control over our financial lives to these institutions and to the government. And it's like, I don't think people, if asked a question that way directly, to say, would you be willing to let the government and let the banking system decide what you can spend your money on? I think the vast majority of people would say, no, I would never agree to that. But I think we are sort of allowing ourselves to get there by becoming more and more willing to give up certain pieces of financial freedom in order for us to feel safer or more secure, or to agree that that particular behavior is improper, and so we're going to let that be censored. So it's it's kind of a long rambling response, but I mean, I think that's a risk that we have just in the world these days, that the more that we allow ourselves to give up these types of freedoms, I think that we could find ourselves in a situation that we never really intended to be in. And so I think it's important to have alternative tools and solutions available to be able to kind of counteract that tendency.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's something that is talked about a lot as far as, I mean, we just see this incremental creep in all areas of government and power. And it's not about whether or not the person in power right now will abuse, what's at their disposal, but the fact that it's open to be abused is a serious issue down the line. And we've seen things like mass surveillance grow and just become a norm. And then, this recent, like, I have my, pretty strong opinions about the lockdowns as far as like we entered into totalitarianism, for like over a year and counting now of people not really having a choice and just being okay with it. We going from like you have freedom and you can go where you please to now like you cannot um go to church, and like meet with people in person, and you're limited in all these different areas and you're forced to wear a mask everywhere you go, and it's this kind of just crazy jump. That's alarming, it's frightening, because on its surface, like wearing a mask to me doesn't feel like that big of a deal. It's not like this life or death thing. I think it's at this point, especially like when where the numbers are at, it's stupid, but just this creep of the government having all this power to dictate what you can and can't do is super problematic. And then seeing that happen in just all of these other realms simultaneously financially, I mean, there's like all these like wild requirements of like they're the most recent one, like if you send a transaction over $10,000, it needs to be reported to the government. And I think that the problem with things like that is treating normal people like criminals before, or with suspicion before there is a good reason to. And we live in a country that was built on this idea of rule of law, and I think that's incredibly important. Uh, you're not guilty until proven so, in this country. And yeah, we're moving away from that for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally like, um, when I first started, I started with Coinbase, and I started with Gemini, and I was totally like okay with putting in all my financial information because I had with Robinhood and I had with, my bank, and, it seemed like the norm. Um, but I'm starting to, become alarmed by it. And, I'm almost hesitant to the point to encourage people to use KYC exchanges, period. And I had this really interesting conversation with a friend when I was onboarding him a couple weeks ago, on the Cash App, and he's like, "What? I have to put all this information to buy Bitcoin? Like this is ridiculous." So, where are some good places that people can bypass all the crazy AML KYC stuff?
Yeah, I think that there's a few different options out there. I think one of the best that we talked about at the meetup was just sort of peer to peer, and I think being able to have a network of folks that have and use Bitcoin, is a great resource for people. Having kind of a peer-to-peer way of exchanging Bitcoin, and doing it, I would say in a more private way, which you can do. And I mean, when you think about it, if you've got a group of folks and they're all buying Bitcoin from Coinbase, and then you're trading amongst each other, that probably isn't the best privacy. I mean, you can maybe have some deniability if you sell some Bitcoin to someone and then they go use it to do something that is illegal. You're probably the person who's going to get the knock on your door first. So I think you do have to be a little bit careful with that, and use some of the the privacy enhancing tools that are available to sort of do that in a way where you're not putting yourself or others at risk. You know, if someone decides to go do something that you know, ends up being tracked on the blockchain. So, you know, again, I think just peer-to-peer interactions, if done the right way, can be a great way, you know, for folks to you know, to get, you know, non-KYC Bitcoin, if you will. You know, there's obviously sort of kind of decentralized exchanges like BISC that I think can be great options. You know, depending on just how you use them, and you know, the types of volume that you're looking to do. I mean, you know, you are going to pay a premium for you know, anytime that you want to acquire coins, you know, outside of a KYC exchange. But I think even if you were to you know, do like a mixer kind of a solution with coins that you got on an exchange, you know, you're going to have to pay extra to you know, to mix your coins and that sort of thing. So you know, I think you just have to mentally know that that, you know, you do have to pay a premium to have privacy within Bitcoin. And you know, I think that's fine. I think that, you know, you should be willing to you know, to pay a little bit extra to use Bitcoin in a more private and trustless way. But you know, again, I think like I said, BISC is a good option. You know, I think there are you know, like ATMs that you can purchase from under a certain amount without having to go through, you know, kind of a KYC threshold. So you know, there's options that are out there that you can use to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's worth looking into those just so that, you know, you're aware of doing that, and that you've got you know, so at least some of your holdings that are you know, from non-KYC sources. I think another way that I just saw someone post about today, you know, mining is another good way. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to, you know, kind of the average person, but you know, you can do mining in a way where you're receiving coins that you really don't have any history to them. And so that can be another way, if you're willing to go to that level of you know, of doing you know, doing mining and receiving coins that don't have, you know, a KYC history that's specifically tied to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, mining is something that I'd really like to see grow in Arizona. Uh, I mean, we've got cheap energy in some areas. We've got stranded energy in some areas. I mean, if you go up north near the Hoover Dam, like it's so inexpensive. And then I think there's going to be a major push in the next few years to really like grow solar energy. And there's problems with solar energy that I think mining could really help support. And that's something. I mean, what do you think, or what do you know about the like current mining situation in Arizona? Is there anything going on?
You know, I'm not familiar whether there's any kind of large scale mining happening in Arizona. You know, I assume that there's probably, you know, hobbyist kind of folks who engage in it, which, you know, I think is great, but it's probably not a sort of scaled situation. You know, I've always thought when you look at the Phoenix area, I mean, we get a lot of our power from the Palo Verde nuclear generating station that's kind of, you know, I think it's maybe 50 miles west of Phoenix. And I've always thought that, you know, nuclear power is you know, potentially a great use or a great a great place where, mining could be done, just because, when you have peaks and troughs in terms of the electricity demand, and I'm not an expert on nuclear power, but you kind of have to moderate that that generation of electricity that's coming from the nuclear reaction. And so I think mining could be a great load for a nuclear power plant to be able to use when when the actual load from like the actual electricity users is low, say like in the middle of the night kind of a thing. If a nuclear power plant had a bank of Bitcoin miners that they could use, they could continue that same load during those off-peak hours, and be able to contribute hash power and be making additional revenue and things like that. So it could reduce the cost of nuclear, because you're getting this additional revenue that you wouldn't be able to get from an off-peak time period. So I think, I don't know if anyone has ever talked to the Palo Verde nuclear power plant here in Arizona, but I feel like that would be an opportunity, just here locally, that I don't know the specific percentage of power that we get out of that station, but that could be a source of hash rate. And if you look at all of the different nuclear stations in the US, I mean, I think that that could be a potentially substantial source of hash power that would be not really, I mean, there's a lot of arguments about, okay, Bitcoin mining is terrible for the environment, is creating all this CO2, it's using energy sources that are producing greenhouse gases, but from a nuclear perspective, I think that's one of these sort of greener energy sources that that could be a way to provide hash power that's maybe a little bit immune or less able to be criticized for CO2 emissions. So that would be one idea. Again, I don't know if anyone has ever thought about approaching Palo Verde about that, but I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, that'll probably come out of one of the meetups. We'll have to get a plan of attack to go present to them or something. I mean, the interesting thing about nuclear power is it's such a taboo subject. Like, people just do not like to touch it, for the most part. And people that do tend to be heavily criticized, which is pretty interesting. But I'm pro-nuclear, personally. I think there's a lot of interesting developments going on in that area, and it makes a lot of sense to shift in a direction, as I'm not like trashing renewable energy in the sense of like geothermal or solar, wind, or whatever, but you kind of have to do something that's consistent, reliable, and nuclear seems to be the most consistent and reliable for sure. But
yeah, it's definitely, when you look at just like the situation that Texas went through a few months ago, and they had the big storm that came through, and their wind and solar power generation went offline because of there were freezing temperatures, and the weather conditions basically made it so that all of that power source went offline. You could see basically that there's it's not dependable, and it's almost a liability, because in order to be able to kind of make it through those periods where you don't have that power source available, then you've got to build spare capacity with natural gas, or coal plants, or any of these sort of dirtier forms of energy. So I think, nuclear has an advantage from the standpoint that it is very steady. It's something where you can have a very consistent load and not be worried about, are all the wind turbines going to freeze up, or, are we going to have a big storm that knocks out the solar capacity? I think there's also, just when you look at wind and solar specifically, it's great that they produce energy without, having direct emissions at the point that the power is being generated. But I think you also have to factor in, all of the energy that was produced to actually create the solar panels and create the wind turbines, and a lot of that is being done, with, like a lot of these solar panels are produced in China. We know that China it gets a lot of its power capacity from coal, and so it's sort of like, you're not really producing clean energy. You're just sort of moving back where the dirty energy came from. So solar and wind is great for producing energy in a cleaner way at the point of generation. But I think you also have to look back and say, okay, well, what was the energy mix that was used to actually create this material? And I think you also look at, like, wind turbines. They have a very limited sort of lifespan, and once they pass that lifespan, then you've got to dispose of these giant blades. And I think they're generally made of, like, fiberglass or composite materials, and there's really no way to recycle that material. So I've seen pictures of these landfills where they're basically stacking row by row by row of wind turbine and the blades from these wind turbines that they just have to bury. And I think that if you looked at the energy used to produce the blades, if you looked at the energy that's needed to dispose of them, I'm sure there's probably been analysis in that kind of a route, but I've got to think that that the actual energy efficiency is much less than what you might think it is.
Yeah, and they're just really annoying to drive by trucks on the highway that are carrying those giant blades and taking up, like, almost both lanes. I think that's the best argument against it right there.
Yeah, it's just I think it makes people feel good about we've got this clean energy source, but I think people don't think through kind of all of the energy that it took to get that in place. And just to your point of, like, transporting these things requires a huge amount of energy. And I don't think that that's necessarily factored into, just the, when you look at, like, incentives that are being given for green energy sources. I don't think, those incentives are really taking into account all of the dirty energy that went to creating that quote unquote clean energy source. It's like, without those subsidies being given to solar and wind, you sort of question whether that would actually be an actual efficient use of energy and an efficient way of generating energy. So it's like, it's looking at just one small piece of the energy generation process, but it's kind of leaving out all of this other part of it that you know, at the end of the day, it's almost like we're subsidizing just, you know, the small, you know, green piece of, you know, solar or wind, but then we've got all of the dirty side of you know, creating that capacity that we're also subsidizing unintentionally.
Yep. Yeah. It's just a big facade, you know. And I think like one of the things that I find really intriguing about Bitcoin is how much work it takes to like really understand, and you have to have a nuanced, hard look at it to really get underneath. And for people coming from this world where things are just you just take things at face value, like this guy's good because of X, you know, or Y, and this guy's bad because of X or Y. They, you know, people judge things based off of like really like silly arguments. The energy debate, you know, over Bitcoin is silly. Like video games take up way more energy. The Call of Duty servers running all the time, you know, and they provide like very little utility to society in the way that Bitcoin does. Like, I'm not like anti video games or anything, but um, and Nick Carter's done so much good work on this, and yet this argument kind of persists, and we have all these stupid arguments about proof of stake coming around now as being a solution for like awful companies like Cardano or IOHK that, you know, I heard recently that they're going to be putting all the citizens of, I think it's Ethiopia, on a blockchain, and collecting all their data like that in a permanent, immutable way, which is kind of terrifying. And
Yeah.
it's like, but yeah, I mean, it is, you know, really, really fascinating to me to, you know, dive down into the nuance of these arguments. And really learn. I mean, one of the most frustrating things about Bitcoin is like I've been reading about it almost on a daily basis for the past 4 years, and I still feel like I just like barely have this grasp of what we're doing and why this is so revolutionary and important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think that if you approach it the right way, Bitcoin should be, you know, pretty humbling in making you think about just what you've sort of taken for granted in the world previously. And, you know, I think money is just sort of kind of the tip of that. I mean, money is hugely important, obviously. You know, but it starts getting into, you know, even more sort of philosophical aspects of, you know, like how are we structuring society? You know, what kind of incentives are we building, you know, as part of our society, as a part of our nation? You know, what are the choices that we're making? You know, the trade-offs that we're making. What are the incentives that you know, that we're sort of unconsciously agreeing to? You know, like I said, when you go back to just how we've structured our financial system and all of the trust that has been built into that, and you know, sort of the willingness of people to you know, to trust in financial institutions and in their government to make good choices and do the right thing. And I think, you know, I don't think people are inherently bad. I don't think that government or financial institutions are inherently bad. But I think that over time, what happens is that there's just sort of a lack of consciousness about decisions that are being made and incentives that are being put in place that end up, you know, getting us to a point where, you know, we have less freedom, we have less, you know, less ability to be independent. And you know, I think that that's unfortunate that you know, we as a society, we just sort of allow that to happen without really consciously thinking of it. And so, you know, I look at Bitcoin as a tool where, yet, you know, it starts off being about money and technology, you know, and the blockchain, and you know, it's really cool how it just functions as a system. But then it kind of, for the people who really get into it, it really makes you start questioning a lot more of how society functions, and questioning whether we're making good decisions as a country and as a society. So I think that's one thing that, for me personally, I've felt that um, Bitcoin has sort of awoken, just a thought process of saying, is this really the best thing that we should be doing, or is this how we should be structuring our society? And I think that's something that, regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum, it's a good thing for people to be questioning, and trying to understand the decisions that they're making unconsciously, and trying to shed light on how society is structured, and how all the incentives are structured in our in our economy. So I think that's an opportunity, that Bitcoin has, that it can really sort of change how we look at the larger picture in general.
Yeah, I think things like that are so important. Have you ever done any martial arts before?
Not as like an ongoing sort of practice, but I can see just the parallel with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I haven't I'm not a jujitsu guy. I was doing jujitsu for a while. I like boxing, kickboxing a lot more, but I mean, you just go into the gym and get your ass kicked, like right off the bat. You've got this white belt, and it doesn't matter how big or small the other person is relative to you. They can kick your ass, just
Hmm.
like I had this situation where, I walked in, I thought I knew a little bit. I'd been, rolling with my friends pretty consistently. And, there was this guy we were drilling, and I was kicking his ass, and then it opened up to just like free roll, and he put me in like a triangle choke 3 times, and I couldn't figure out how he did it. And he's like this little tiny guy, and I just felt like an idiot. But I mean, I think like one of the things that we do as a human is kind of programmed into our brain, where we try and like conserve as much energy, like mental energy, as possible. And so we create these patterns and these ruts. And so like I used to work in social work, and this is something you see a lot, like people that have these baseline uh affects or emotional reactions to things. So somebody that's anxious and runs anxious, they're going to default to anxiety, because it's kind of been programmed into them. um and like you're saying, I think it's so important, like for somebody to be successful, they have to learn how to not be anxious, and change that perspective. To be successful in jiu-jitsu, you have to learn how to have humility, and how to learn, and instead of like just me like storming off and being like, that guy sucks, he put me in 3 triangle chokes, I have to be like, oh man, how did he do that? That was really cool. And give respect. And I think coming into the Bitcoin space, that's the case. Like I do have a podcast, but I just love to listen to people to talk. There's so many like knowledgeable people out there that just know so much. And I think that's the case in general, just for the world. It's like, I mean, I think everybody thinks that they know everything, and the second that they're put into a position to actually make decisions, it's kind of a terrifying reality. And it puts you in a position that like you realize you don't know what you're doing, to a certain extent, or if you're prideful enough, you'll or narcissistic enough, you'll be like Gavin Newsom and like be um, the great dictator. But uh, yeah, I mean, that's been my experience with Bitcoin over and over again, of just like getting my ass kicked. Whether it's like trying to learn how to run a node, or get BTC Pay server up and running, or um, looking at, how do I manage my wallet correctly? Do very little basic things. And it's such a great great experience for me. And
Yeah, I think if you approach it the right way, I think a lot of people, they start off with, being attracted to Bitcoin just for sort of, monetary reasons. Obviously, when you watch the price do what it does, people get attracted to that, and they want to understand, what has created the situation. But I think, you also tend to approach it. I mean, uh, unless you got into Bitcoin in, like, 2010, 2011, you're always going to have this sort of feeling that, oh gosh, I missed the boat on this, and so it sort of predisposes you to think that, well, um, maybe Bitcoin isn't really um, the solution for everything. Maybe there's something else out there that is going to, outperform Bitcoin in the long run. I think a lot of people are used to the idea of you know, like with MySpace and Facebook. MySpace came along first, and it was sort of like this early social network, and then Facebook came after that, and ended up being a lot better, and it ended up sort of leaving MySpace behind. And so I think people are sort of predisposed to think, well, Bitcoin was sort of the first one of these digital currencies, and there's no way that it could be as good as something that would be developed now, and therefore I should go try to figure out what's going to be the Facebook to Bitcoin's MySpace. And I think that I mean, even when I first got into Bitcoin, had that idea of trying to figure out, all right, what's going to be the next Bitcoin, or where is the better version of Bitcoin going to be coming from. And I think it takes some time to really sit down and kind of understand just what does Bitcoin provide, and what is it intended to do. I think that's not really obvious to someone first getting into it. I think it's gotten a lot better over the years, because there's a lot of great material out there, that has been published, and you can get up to speed faster in Bitcoin now than you could, say, 5 years ago. But I think, like, 5 years ago, if you were getting into it, your initial thought would be, okay, well, this is going to be a new payment system. It's going to take over for, PayPal and Visa, and we're going to be able to do, all of these transactions, very cheaply. And I think it's just natural that people have that sort of initial reaction to it, because they view it as competing with payment systems, as opposed to being kind of a new form of money. And then when you start thinking about money, I think that's where people they start realizing, okay, well, this is not just really a payment system. This is more sort of foundational. But it takes some time to get there, and I think a lot of people just they don't approach it with sort of the intellectual humility of saying, well, I don't really understand this, but I'm going to do my best to take the time and really try to understand and try to build a foundation of knowledge. I think people look at just sort of the financial impact that it's had, and then they look at the price, and they look and say, oh, how can I get in on that? And I think inevitably that turns to, okay, well, I want to get in on something that's early. I want to get in on something that's relatively cheap, and that way I can multiply my investment. And so we talk about, like, unit bias with respect to altcoins. So I think a lot of people get sort of lured away from Bitcoin, just with that thought process. And it does take time, to maybe have to go through, seeing an altcoin crash, or, maybe losing money because, you really didn't understand something, and then, having to come back and say, okay, well, I realized that I was thinking about this the wrong way, and now I can start to understand, the value proposition a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. Watching the Ethereum Foundation dump their pre-mined coins. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing. Like Bitcoin has these 4-year cycles, and that's where it's different than jujitsu. Jujitsu, you go in, you get your ass kicked right off the bat, but in a bull market, might take a little bit of time for you to get your ass kicked.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. I think it's been interesting, just within the last like couple of weeks, this latest drawdown. Um, you know, I personally felt like that it was definitely alt season, and you could sort of feel in the marketplace just a feeling that, okay, um, Bitcoin is just kind of stagnant, and all these altcoins are taking off and doing fantastic. And I think that that just seems like it's part of the bull run cycle, is that um, people get drawn in by the growth in the price of Bitcoin, and then try to find other ways to to achieve that growth in price, without really taking the time to understand why a lot of the altcoins are just not not good ways to invest your time and money. And so it seems like, my guess is that we'll always have these kinds of pumps as the price does what it does. I mean, we end up every cycle, bringing in more new people, and so every group, every cohort of new adopters, they tend to be bigger than the last group, and they tend to have to go through the same lessons as previous groups. And so from that standpoint, it wouldn't surprise me to see this kind of continue, at least until the point where maybe we reach the broader adoption, hyper Bitcoinization kind of scenario, where maybe at that point it becomes less prevalent. But I think you're always going to have people who are trying to just make money without having to put in a lot of effort. And that's just, I think, human nature. So
Yeah.
as long as we have humans motivated by having these large windfalls of financial success, I think that we'll have altcoins that will pump and dump.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like the important thing to distinguish, like a lot of people coming in, they see people's Bitcoin or Maxis visceral response to shitcoins, and think that they're just being intolerant, and like you said, you were interested in the shitcoins. I'm a recovering shitcoiner. There's a reason why we have these beliefs, and we've done research on it. One of the things that blew my mind is I was on YouTube and I saw a Coinbase ad, and they're still shilling EOS, which is a freaking joke, like that. I'm pretty sure all these new people, have never even heard of EOS. They're too focused on whatever other project, but like that was a big one when I came in 2018. There's a lot of hype around it, and it's done nothing, accomplished nothing. And what we're trying to do is help new people with these, and maybe there's like different tactics we can take. I think Guy Swan's Shitcoin Insider is one of the best resources for learning about the altcoins and the problems, because they have a nuanced conversation about it. They actually go into the fundamental problems. I'm not the best at that, because I don't really want to get into the details too much of the different altcoins, because I think it's like a waste of time for me personally. But yeah, it's hard to recapture the network effect that Bitcoin has. You've got people all over the globe that are actually using it. I mean, what's happening in Bitcoin Beach is not happening on any of the other projects anywhere else.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, a huge argument for why there's not going to be another next Bitcoin per se. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, nothing's certain, but I think except for the block subsidy, that's pretty certain. But
Yeah. Yeah, I do think, just Bitcoin is really, I think it's focused on, providing this censorship resistant sort of form of digital value and exchange. And, you look at the trade-offs that Bitcoin has made over the years. You could argue that those have been sort of, they've been made, and haven't necessarily been good things for the price. You could make an argument that the decisions that have been made in Bitcoin in terms of the direction of development, maybe made it so that the price didn't pump as quickly as it could have otherwise. But I think that, when you think about, again, the purpose of Bitcoin, which is really having this independent form of money that can resist any attempt to, to subvert it or corrupt it or to change it. I think that's where you start to see the value. And, maybe it was not, the decision that would maximize the value in the short term, but I think that in the long term, it's the strategy that will ultimately be most likely to succeed. When you think about, what may happen in the future, and the fact that it seems like our society is only moving towards more and more control and centralization, and you know being able to dictate how people should live their lives. So I think that, from that perspective, yeah, Bitcoin, it's maybe not the rocket ride to the top that we would want it to be, just in a matter of a few years. But I think that ultimately it's the strategy that will probably prove to be successful in the long run, because that's really just the value proposition of any of these decentralized currencies, is being able to resist control, being able to resist corruption, like fiat currencies have had over the last since as long as they've existed.
yeah. And when you really get into the weeds of what's happening with Bitcoin development, everything with Lightning, it is just mind blowing. Like, it's so great. So yeah, we'll start wrapping up. Going to Classic Crust tonight, Bitcoin business.
Yeah, it's Bitcoin Pizza Day, so I think we're gonna try to make it over to Classic Crust. I was looking back. I saw some pictures that I took, like 5 years ago from Bitcoin Pizza Day there, and it was. I was looking at the pictures, and like the restaurant was empty. So it'll be interesting to see this year, how many people are there, and just how much that may have changed. But yeah, I think it's just another Bitcoin holiday. It's a great reason to celebrate, and to be appreciative of what we have in the form of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people there today, because I've been watching the Meetup.
Yeah.
Arizona Bitcoin Meetup. I think that's what it's called.
Mhm.
And they had a bunch of attendees there, so it might be pretty jam packed.
Yeah, it could be. We might have to, try and make some room. But I hope that there's a lot of people there, and that you know, it's a good event, good chance to meet up with Bitcoiners.
Yeah, it's gonna be a pilgrimage, I think,
Yep,
going forward. Kind of,
yep.
yeah. So where's some good people or places people can follow you?
I'm pretty much just on Twitter, so it's Russ Harben on Twitter, and yeah, I would say that's where I am for the most part.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. It's a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks, Alex.
That was a great conversation with Russ, and I'll definitely have him on the podcast again. But yeah, I mean, diving into privacy. Privacy is so important, and it's something that, we have just kind of let go for a while. There's been some people out there that have been hardcore, but I think people are waking up to the issues that we have with services like Google and Amazon Web Services, and across the board. It's not just about privacy, it's about censorship. And we need tools that prevent that really empower the individual. We've seen the individual just get wrecked over the past year and a half. And it's time to take the power back, and it's time to prevent stuff like that from ever happening again. And Bitcoin makes that possible. I'm so excited about Bitcoin energy in Arizona right now. Our meetups are popping, both Tucson and Phoenix. There's just so much cool energy about wanting to change the way that we do money. Stephen did a great presentation last week at the Arizona Bitcoin Network up in Phoenix doing Bitcoin 101. Hopefully have that posted in the next couple of weeks to the Arizona Bitcoin Network YouTube channel. And yeah, I mean, if you really want to be a part of something cool, get to the Bitcoin meetups. That's ground zero for really building this network out in Arizona, teaching people about Bitcoin, getting, the wider adoption that, we really need to change things. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I did, and have a good one.